Hello and welcome. Hi, my name is Dr. Katrina Gamble. I am the CEO of Sojourn Strategies. I am so excited to have you all here for the next episode in our Building Belonging series. Sojourn Strategies is a social impact consulting firm, all run by women, and we work with our clients to help them move our world closer towards equity and justice by providing services around research, campaigns, and philanthropic advising. And over the last couple of years, we have had conversations with community members all across the country about this idea of belonging in community and how important it is. Right now, all across the country, we are in a bit of a loneliness crisis. People are feeling extremely polarized and disconnected. And we really believe that community and belonging is the antidote to that. And so we had conversations with lots of folks about that. And we wanted to start this series to have conversations with industry leaders across different sectors to learn from them about how they leverage community and belonging to help support folks move through this moment towards actionable hope. And so I'm really excited today to be joined by Aundrea Cline Thomas. She is an Emmy Award-winning journalist and also the CEO and founder of the Next Best Thing podcast and Mountain Court Media. Aundrea, thank you for being here.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, Aundrea, before we jump in, I wanted to give you an opportunity to take a second to introduce yourself to folks who are joining us. And if you could just also share a little bit about your why. How did you get into doing the work that you're doing and lead the path that led you to launching Mountain Court Media?
So my background is journalism. I spent more than 15 years as an on-air television journalist. Started in Macon, Georgia, worked my way up to New York City, and then in 2022 started Mountain Court Media, where I like to say now that I help my clients tell more authentic and impactful stories about themselves, their work, and each other. And my why has always been storytelling. I'm always just so curious about people. Really, storytelling is the thing that has existed since the beginning of time. And if you ever question its importance, just think back to if you have a child or when you were a child, it's like the first thing that we introduce to children are stories, sometimes even while they're in the womb. They're just so incredibly powerful. And so my work now really centers on helping individuals really realize their story and reclaim their agency, to how helping organizations create narratives that best connect them with their ideal audiences, and creating creative projects that help tell authentic stories that are with nuance and that are rooted in history and that are fun, quite frankly.
Yes.
Yes. You can't forget about the fun. Everything's so serious now.
Right. There are so many things that you said that I was holding on to, both the importance of helping people use their stories to find their own agency, and the being rooted in authenticity. And what I mentioned at the top, when I was doing the introduction, there's been this growing challenge, not just only in the US, but across the globe, about just this deep decline in trust and people's inability when they see things online, or if they're having conversations, their inability to connect to it, because we're just inundated with so much information, a lot of it not really deeply authentic or connected. So what you shared is so important. And one of the things that when we were doing our research and we were talking to folks across the country, that we found was really an antidote to some of the cynicism that that folks are feeling right now, is creating spaces of belonging. And sometimes when I say that, folks are like, well, what is belonging? But I always say, you know it when you feel it. And so when I'm having these conversations, I always like to start by asking, what was a moment where you had a sense of deep belonging, and what was the reason that led to you having that feeling of belonging?
Well, like to start by saying, I think while you were speaking, I was thinking about how I think that there is a deep correlation between distrust and the isolation that we're seeing right now.
Mm,
I think that there is such a correlation between those two. Thankfully, I am very privileged and lucky to say that I felt a sense of belonging in my family. And my family's from Sierra Leone, West Africa. My dad came in the late 60s. My mom came in the early 70s. And when they came, they had the typical immigrant story of like the community of Sierra Leoneans in the DC area. They were all going to school. They were all like helping each other out, roommates and all that. So by the time my siblings and I came around, I was literally raised by the village. The whole village
mhm,
raises a child. I
mhm.
had so many people around me. It was my normal. I didn't realize that it really wasn't so normal until I like started talking to other people. But we were raised by so many people, and I was always in community. And so I always felt a sense of belonging in what home was defined by. So it wasn't just my physical home, but it was like the Sierra Leonean community that I grew up around. And so that was so powerful because it gave me like a core narrative. And it was really outside of that bubble, quite frankly, that I didn't always feel like I belonged, but I always had another narrative to kind of that I was rooted in to counter what I was hearing outside. So it really helped me develop a healthy sense of self from a really young age.
Mm. I love that. Could you say more about that piece about
Yeah.
because you had that core sense of your own narrative and
Mhm.
belonging, that even when you were it seems like that was even a tool for you when
Yeah.
you were in spaces where you didn't have that sense of belonging. Could you share a little bit more about that? Like
Yeah.
how having that foundation helped you navigate other spaces that may have been less welcoming or friendly?
I mean, as a kid, I was like, oh, we got to go to this other thing again, or oh, I got to be dragged to this other thing. Like it was really irritating as a child. But we also, every other year, went to Sierra Leone. And then
Mhm.
from Sierra Leone, we'd go to England to visit other family. Sorry, I'm in New York City, so you hear these sirens here.
I'm in
Um,
DC, same thing.
yeah. So, I always tell people right now when I'm like coaching people or just kind of walking them through processes of like it's okay to feel maybe that you don't belong or have a negative feeling about yourself. You're going to feel that. That's going to bubble up. You always need a counter narrative to say what is true. And so I just had other inputs of like, okay, you say this about this category that I'm in. I just know that's not true, right?
Mhm.
Because I've seen it with my own eyes. I have gone to Africa. I have seen people there. So when I'm coming up and there's all this idea of what Africa is, I've actually been there. Like I know, I know that that is not all the way true. Um, and so that's really kind of how it manifested is that my parents always had this in community, but also it wasn't just like being there. We had to do things like we had to keep our clothes nice, and we outgrew my family's pretty tall, and so I outgrew clothes very quickly, and so but we had to keep our clothes and say, okay, you have to wash the clothes and fold them, and then that goes to your cousins back in Africa. We would go with it was 2 suitcases per person. I don't know if you've ever seen anybody travel to Africa. Those suitcases are not small, and so big old suitcases, but we would come back and they'd be consolidated because
Mhm.
we gave pretty much everything away. Um, and so I grew up in a space. My dad worked in a hotels and he like worked his way up from being a porter to like managing the housekeeping staff. And so he'd have, like new immigrants on his staff. And so if we had like extra plates and all of that stuff, he would be taking that to give to his team because they're new immigrants. And so we always had enough to give. We lived within, our means, but we always, because we were American, you had something to give. And so I always just came up with that idea. And I wasn't able to articulate the importance of that until I was, much older. Um, but yeah, that's been a core function of my life and really creating my own identity.
I love that.
Mhm.
And this idea, I am a big believer in the power of community. And
Mhm,
so I love the story you're telling of both what you gave, what your family gave to community, but also how being in community, how that also gave you so much about how you were able to develop your identity.
mhm.
And so that it's not always necessarily about something tangible. It doesn't have to be a tangible, I'm giving this to a person. It's also about the experiences that we have in those
Mhm.
that we're building. So,
Yeah, and the rituals and the food and the music and the dancing. I mean, it's really fun and it's really beautiful, but I just think that it's a very Western idea of being in isolation. Like
mhm,
not literally nothing happens. Nothing good happens in isolation.
mhm.
Nothing.
Yeah. Let's dig in on and before we do, but when you mentioned the smell and food, that's one thing too when I tell people when they think about a moment where they feel a sense of belonging, I'm like, what did it smell like? What did
Okay.
like, how did you feel? Because those are real tangible things to remind us that you can hold on to and go back to maybe when you're in a tough moment. So I love that
Yeah.
you name those things
Yes.
specifically. But I wanted to dig in on this point about isolation. Earlier, you said that you think that there is a direct correlation between isolation and the increasing levels of distrust,
Mhm,
not only here in the US, but really across the globe. From the work that you do, what do
mhm.
you see as a solution to that? Like, how do we, especially now with so much being on social media, and I think the pandemic and COVID forced us to be isolated and the transition back into the world after that. Like, how through your work are you helping people move past that isolation to start building deeper levels of trust and engagement?
So, the gift of journalism was that it allowed me to be with every type of person from dirt roads, literal dirt roads, to penthouses. I
Mhm,
started my career in Macon, Georgia, and I had never spent considerable time in the South. And I came with my preconceived notions. I was being called a Yankee. I'm like, oh, what? Like I had only seen the word written in books, and I'm like, what is this? Um, and that really taught me that you can't expect other places to operate from your experiences, but that doesn't mean that that place doesn't have something to offer. It's just you have to stop looking at it to be a reflection of your past experiences, and that opens you up to receive what it is, and some of the stuff you're going to like, and some of the stuff you're not going to like. But um, there's a way to find value in how other people experience life, and that was always like that was what I was always so curious about. um and so, Brene Brown says that you can't hate people up close. And I think the reason why the scarcity narrative works so well is because we are actually not up close. And
mhm,
so, if you look around your circle and who you know, if everybody could be interchangeable and everything is the same, then you've got some work to do,
mhm,
you know? And when you go into other spaces I always say, you gotta stop talking and start listening, right? Stop talking, start listening first, um, and learn on your own, and then develop the relationships to then where you can start asking questions of people and asking them to help you do that labor, right? But you don't want to like labor, put your labor on somebody else. It's your work to do. It's in and I think that's central in terms of that being your work to do in that perspective. Um, so I really think it's about just do something else. This is why traveling is so important. This is why, just being in a city like New York, I meet people all the time who they haven't been to a different borough, or they haven't checked out this museum, or they haven't, and it's all within their means. It's, they have free nights and stuff like that. So we have to recognize that when we are in homogeneous spaces, that we have made a very distinct choice and that we're doing ourselves a disservice.
yeah. Um, choose one thing to do to put yourself outside of your comfort zone. And yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Um, when you in the work that you do with clients, I can
Yeah.
imagine that people still feel stuck. Even if you said that, you're like, you need to go be with people that challenge
Yeah.
you and be in community. Like what's like one tip you might give for folks who are working in other communities or working with team members who really feel stuck about like how do they get out of this like mode of isolation to start connecting and building more community?
The way that comes up in my work is I actually have a membership community that is tied to the podcast. So the podcast is called The Next Best Thing, and that's the name of the community as well. And so I'm dealing with people within the context of their careers and really either trying to level up in their career or finding new jobs or navigating the uncertainty of the job market right now. And oftentimes they think the conversations will just center on their resume, how to update your resume. And I'm always like, well, who are you in community with? Because really community is about, one of the benefits is opportunity. And a lot of people are in isolation in that context of like just applying to dozens and dozens of jobs and then withstanding the onslaught of rejection after rejection and then creating a narrative in their mind about who they are as a result of their temporary circumstance. And so I'm always like, okay, what do you like? This is not about like going to something that's like completely off the
Mhm.
beaten path, right? Like you like fitness, join a class. You like technology. What are the technology organizations you can go to? And they have, happy hours, they have conferences, they have, and just go to that. So it's not saying it is stepping out of your comfort zone, but I think more than that, it's just being curious. Like you
Mm,
have to be more curious, and to understand that there are many different ways to do the same thing. And also in the context of career, I frame it in terms of you don't know where your next opportunity is coming from. You don't know where your blessing's going to come from, and you don't know who that next angel will be. But they're not going to knock on your door, right? And you have to be outside to do that. And so it's interesting. I was just at a conference and it was for creators, and they're talking about like the proliferation of AI and how, AI is making it very difficult, and will continue to make it almost indistinguishable between what's real and what's not real on
mhm.
the internet. And so the only way to counter that is to be in person. And so we've just got to go outside. We just
Yes.
like, go ahead.
Yes. No, I was just saying I love that. People are like, we outside.
You got to be outside. You got to go outside. I can't tell you how many people I talk to who are just like in their heads, like, oh, this is how I'm going to make it happen. And it was like, you got to go outside because you can convince yourself of a lot of things. That's a danger of the isolation. And journalism also taught me that if you're dealing with it, guess what? A lot of people are dealing
Mhm,
with it. Your
mhm.
mind will tell you that you are alone, that nobody understands, that nobody's been through this before. But that's always the benefit of journalism, is to say if one person's dealing with it, then they are just a microcosm of something even bigger. So find your people. Find
Yes.
your people.
Go outside and
Yes.
see other people. And
Yes.
one of the things that you said about you don't know where your next opportunity is
Mhm.
going to come from, I think that is so important. I often tell people, I mean, almost every job, position, ability, even my ability to start Sojourn came
Yes.
from the relationships that I built and maintained. Even my ability to do the work that I do,
Mhm.
it comes very much from holding on to strong relationships. In fact, one of Sojourn's core values is like we consider ourselves a people-centered firm because we just think you can't do anything well without having deep relationships, both with your team, your clients, the communities that you're working in. So I really appreciate you naming that. That
Mhm.
community is also a way in which we find opportunities. I did not plan to ask this question, but because you mentioned AI, and
Yeah.
also I was online scrolling when I probably shouldn't have been scrolling, and I saw this video that someone posted of it was like a Black woman going to get her break. It was literally, it looked like a real person
Mhm.
telling a story of them going out to get their, Black woman going to get her hair braided or something. I won't go into how many things that were problematic about that video, but for someone like me who's not deep into I had to read the post to understand. I was like, "Oh, this is fake." And
Mhm.
so, um, I'm, like, curious your thoughts, like, especially someone who, is like a former journalist,
Mhm.
working to push people to build community. Like, what's, like, your thoughts on, like, how do we navigate some of these,
Mhm.
there's just, like, so many things that you can't tell is true or not true,
Mhm.
on social media. Before, we just thought it was, you know, the words, but now it can be even the actual video, and
Mhm.
what that means about how people navigate that and still build authentic community, at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just is again, it goes into the curiosity piece. And so AI is dangerous in terms I think AI is also like helpful. It's a helpful tool in all of that. I think that the point of contention, there are a few, on a number of them actually, but it's when you don't know the basics, it's hard to distinguish. You don't have like the foundation. It's hard to distinguish, okay, what is fact and what is fiction. If you're not reading, if you're not valuing, you're not curious, you're not leaning into things. And I think sometimes we just say we don't feel like it's our responsibility. We just are like, okay, life is hard, and everyone's just kind of going through their day. But just in terms of a habit that we need to have, like media literacy is completely waning. Um, that we've got to kind of change our diet in
Mm,
terms of what we consume, how we educate ourselves, and we have to actually put a premium on the education. And and then there's also needs to probably be legislation around it as well, and
yes.
and give it guardrails, because there are zero guardrails around it right now. And so, um, but that's why I was saying, like in the conference, they were really talking about it in terms of um, the impact that it's going to have on creators of like what will separate you from somebody else if somebody can just put your stuff in an AI
Mhm.
bot and it can just spit out certain things, and then there's like copyright infringement, stuff like that. Like they could just take your IP and use it as their own and leverage it financially. Um, how do you then distinguish yourself in that pool? And again, it just comes to it's almost like going to take us back in time, right? Of like, no, we got to meet people in person, or virtually, but hopefully in person. Hopefully the arts come back even more robustly in terms of expression where you're seeing it there. um, yeah, it's just very, I don't know. I don't know, but I do know that we need to participate in the discussions right now, that we need to start using AI. If you haven't already, you need to understand its capabilities and how to use it, to just stay on the growth curve, because it's already here and it's moving faster, and it will change things faster than anything that we have seen. And so just staying away from it or being scared of it actually doesn't do anybody justice. We have to ensure that the inputs that these language learning models are being trained on don't just continue to create bias, that they actually are used in a way that might help us with some of the issues that we're having right now. There's still very much opportunity for it to be used for good and for it to turn the ship around, but we need everybody to be at the table and having these conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. We definitely, so it's one of those things that you can't just pretend that it's going to go away. And so learning how to use it the best as you can, and plug, when you're saying it needs to be regulated, literally right at this moment, I haven't got caught up on the news this morning, so maybe something's changed, but in the big, um, tax reconciliation bill that's moving through Congress, they're attempting to put a 10-year moratorium on states regulating AI. So anyway, if anyone who cares about that, go call your senators.
But you know what?
Uh,
You know what? AI is actually a bipartisan issue.
yeah,
You know, like there were task forces created that were bipartisan task forces because it impacts every single industry. Um, and that is actually an issue I do feel like we can have consensus on in terms of um, how do you regulate it but not also stifle it at the same time. It's the delicate balance, but I think that we can start at least broadly creating some guardrails. And I do believe that companies would want guardrails. Right now it's just, it can't just be levied disproportionately. But if everybody had to say, okay, in terms of this growth and in terms of the growth of this technology, everybody has to play by these rules. I think that
right.
the companies actually want some of that, because competition then will be within this framework. The issue is when this company can compete in this way and this company cannot compete in that way, you know, and it just creates that imbalance. But if there are at least broader guardrails of what it can and can't do, or the steps that need to be taken, or you know, the approvals necessary when something is done, I think that's something that actually all sides can get behind.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you a couple more questions, but if
Yes.
folks who are joining us live, thank you for being here. If you have
Mhm.
questions for Aundrea, drop them in the chat and we will get to them in a second. So, just as we were hopping on, we were just talking about how there's so much going on in the world. Literally it's not even every day. I mean, if I have not in the next 27 minutes since we've been having this conversation, check the news. I'm sure there's something that's happened that is changing the world or disrupting something, or there's just a lot of things happening and moving across the globe right now. And I know for some people that can be really overwhelming and lead to folks wanting to kind of, we're already talking about disconnect, check out, tune out. And, but I'm a hope pusher.
You are. Yes, you
As you
are.
know, and so I'm always trying to encourage people or help folks find ways to find pathways to what we call actionable hope. So not just, oh, I hope things get better, or like I have hope, but like what are ways in which we can put hope into action? And
Mhm.
so I wanted to ask you, like, um, what are some examples or like advice you would give to folks right now of like finding ways towards like actionable hope?
You know, I put this in my newsletter this week where I was like, I recognize all that's happening in the world right now, and I'm not exactly sure what to do about that. But what I'm focusing on is my assignment. And so I think
Mhm.
that like when I can't have broad hope in the capital H hope in the worldly sense, I'm like, but I will always have hope in myself. And okay, how are my gifts best used, and who can I serve the most? Right? And so that is my work, especially in the community, and helping people see themselves differently, and helping them articulate their value proposition, understanding how to navigate this moment in the job market, but not in terms of just getting a job, but creating more options for their lives, centering how they want to live and letting work exist to support how they want to live as opposed to the
Mhm.
other way around. And that starts with the story that you're telling yourself about yourself, which is the hardest story to tell, but it's the most important story. And so I feel like in childhood, we're given this agency to like dream and, you know, say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And then at some point, we turn that story over to somebody else. We give that pen to somebody else to allow them to write our stories.
Mm.
And so, like the work that I do, I feel like it's a reclamation in terms of you are taking that pen back that because a story is being written about you whether you know it or not. The
Mm,
question is, are you participating in your own narrative? And I think far too many people, especially women, especially people of color, are not fully participating in the narrative because, like, we go into these spaces and we have to do a lot of things to just exist there. And I think that one of the things that is great about where we are, that we have a digital economy, like there are just more options available now than ever before. So I choose to see where the opportunities are and how we can adapt to the opportunities, not just for adapting's sake, but to really have that childlike hope of, this is what I want to do, and here's the path to get there. So I just hope my work is a bridge to, for people to figure out what their path is, and to serve in that way.
that's so powerful
Mhm.
that people are writing the story about you, whether you want them to or not. And so
Yep.
you should take the power to write your own story.
Yeah.
I
We
love
would
that so much.
we would like, that was like a hard thing in news, was like, especially if there was a murder, let's say. It's
Mm,
oftentimes in murder stories. And you have to find the family, and you have to be like, I am doing the story. Like, the story is going to happen. And I just would like to give you an opportunity to participate in any way that you feel comfortable with. And it's oftentimes, and like literally it just happened. They haven't even like been able to rest with the information. And that's when I realized, oh, no, no, no. The story's always being written. And so, and it's going to happen, and whether you're participating or not. And I think the way people are experiencing it now is in having to apply for jobs. I think that's how it's probably manifesting in the biggest volume right now, is like, which is why you need other people to share your story on your behalf. Like, you got to tell people, like, this is who I am, this is what I need, and make sure that everything that you're putting out there is in alignment to the story you want told about yourself. Like, you're auditing your social media, that you're women, that you're tooting your horn, right? That you're not
yes,
out here humble and meek, that you're saying, no, no, I did that. That was the project that I worked on, and this is the award that I won. Because it just doesn't serve you in this space to not, I always tell people, but you did the work, right?
mhm,
And like, oh, I just don't, but you did the work. It's not like you're not telling the truth. You did the work.
right.
So you're
My
just
friend,
sitting
my
back.
friend, my friend, Efioma Ike always says, she's like, if it's true, it's not bragging.
That's what I say too. That's what
I
I
love
say
that.
too.
It's so, and I feel like it's so true, especially for, women.
Yes.
And, we're taught that makes, you're seen as like aggressive or you're doing too much. And like, no, that's, yeah,
Yeah.
the
Because the
truth.
thing is that if you can't expect other people. I think there is a whole expectation that, like, oh, I'm going to be seen and I'm going to be understood, but I'm not going to tell the story for people to see and understand me. Right. And it's just like, you've got to participate. You've got to participate in your own narrative, and you can't wait for other people. I do this thing on my Instagram page and with the community, is Friday wins. And I always say, the reason why we do it is that we can't wait for other people to validate us. We have to validate ourselves first. And then when people say, oh, you're amazing, you say, welcome to the party that's already started, you know? Because you just can't wait, because then you'll live and die by the applause, right? And that's the whole
Mm,
thing about, I've been thinking a lot about the difference between just being grounded and being rooted. And like, being rooted is that the storm can come, and some branches might fall off, but the tree withstands the storm because the roots are deep. And I think we just have to really stop we have to start really being rooted and saying, who am I, and allowing that to be okay. How do I work best? And that's like kind of the process that I've been going through since transitioning, since 2022 to starting my own business, is that an entrepreneurship has a wild way of forcing you to face yourself. But it's just like, no, this is who I am, and I just need to find my tribe. Um, and thankfully that's worked out very well for me.
that I love that. That is a gym. I'm definitely going to take some. Molly was talking about what she's going to put on a sticky note earlier.
Yeah.
I'm going to put on a sticky note after this conversation, knowing the difference between being rooted and grounded.
Mhm.
I think that's like such a useful piece of advice. So I think I'm trying to see if there's a lot of love in the comments, but I
Oh,
don't see any
thank you.
questions. So if there's not any questions, Aundrea, I want to first just say thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. It's been incredible. It's been so fun.
Thank you.
I think there are so many lessons that you shared that I know people are going to take away from this conversation. But I wanted to just give you a second to share a little bit more. If there's like anything you want to leave with our community, how can people find you? What are ways in which they can work with you to learn how to tell their story in this moment? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll start just by, in terms of just reiterating why we're here, is really to talk about community, and just the power of it, to see yourself reflected, to learn something more, to have a space where people can nudge you to who you might not even believe you can become. But guess what? You can get there, and you can get there with others,
Mhm.
not by yourself. So I just really want to leave people with that please do something in these work from home, situations. Like, please do something to get out there and put that on your calendar and prioritize that. For me, I have the podcast, the Next Best Thing podcast. It's everywhere where you like to watch or listen to podcasts. You can get it there. We're almost at 100 episodes. So there's a lot to catch up on. Katrina, I spoke to her twice on the podcast. So you can check it out there. And then we also have the Next Best Thing community. If you follow me on LinkedIn, I talk about it. And so you'll get the links for when we open the doors again. So probably will be in August. But yes, I'm here to help you with anything that you need, as it pertains to telling the story about yourself, and really telling the story about your organization, and just doing the work to put goodness out in the world.
Thank you so much, Aundrea, for being here. I really, really, really appreciate you. And definitely, folks, if there are things that Aundrea said that resonated with you, especially the importance of community and how we can leverage that and learning how to tell our own stories, make sure you follow. And yes, listen to her podcast. It's great.
Yes. Thank
Um,
you.
and we will be back with another episode of the Building Belonging series, and we'll share more of that on our social media. You can find out more about Sojourn Strategies. You can follow us at Sojourn Strategies on Instagram and LinkedIn. And yeah, thanks for joining us. See you next time, y'all.